Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our Working Together webinar today with Quantum. And today we're going to be reviewing how allied health professionals like yourself can work with Quantum to achieve better outcomes for their clients, especially in the NDIS, HCP, job access and DVA sectors. Our main presenter today is Peter Cracknell in our Queensland office, but we've also got Leanne and Mike and Jeff and Stuart on the line, and some lovely OTs who have joined us from Adaptability right there in our Brisbane showroom. So just a little bit of webinar housekeeping to start. So please stay muted during most of the webinar to avoid any background noise, because we are recording the webinar. If you do, we will make time for questions at the end. So, and if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. You can just click on the chat bubble to get there, or you can use Alt and H if you're a keyboard user. And we are recording the webinar, as I said, and we'll make that available afterwards. So I'll just go through a bit of an overview of the format of today's webinar. So we'll have a bit of an introduction to Quantum, and then we'll be talking about how Quantum collaborates with allied health professionals. So I'm just trying to get to my screen here. We'll introduce Tara Reynolds from Adaptability Therapy and her team. We'll have a bit of a hands-on overview of some of the devices that Quantum has here. Then we'll talk about some of the case studies from successful collaborations, and then we will have a question and answer session. And finally, there is a quiz at the end that you can, I'll put a link in the chat that you can visit and complete, and we'll also send that around afterwards. And if you complete that, we'll send you a certificate. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Peter.
Great, thank you very much, Rebecca. Hello, and welcome to our Site Support Centre in Brisbane. I'm a vision technology specialist. I'm also the manager for Quantum in Queensland and the Northern Territory. Here in the Queensland operation, we have 5 people. We also have a Site Support Centre in Melbourne, Victoria. We have 3 people in Victoria, and we have another 7 in our head office in Sydney. That's over 2 site support centres in North Sydney and South Sydney. So the purpose of today is really to give you an overview of some of the things that we specialise in, and to encourage you hopefully to engage more with print disability, and I'll be talking a bit about print disability in a moment. So first of all, a little bit about Quantum. So Quantum RLV, or Quantum Reading Learning Vision, actually started as an R&D company back in the late 70s. Our founding director, Tim Connell, then started a small engineering company, and initially in medical instruments, then expanded into Braille devices, and we were one of the first manufacturers of a talking Braille typewriter called the Mountbatten Brailler. That was a very successful innovation. It's helped many, many blind children to learn Braille. And we exported that all over the world. It was a very successful product and continues to be a very successful product for us. In the 90s, we moved from blindness also into low vision as well, and a whole range of low vision devices. We also became a master distributor for the JAWS software program. In the 2010s, we started to do a lot more work with software that would help people with literacy issues such as dyslexia, also with Dragon, naturally speaking, and digital access to electronic materials as well. So a lot broader than just blindness and vision impairment. In fact, we now define ourselves as a company that specialises in print disability, and I'll talk a little bit about print disability as we go through. So a couple of years ago, our CEO, Tim Connell, who was a major shareholder in Quantum, decided he wanted to retire after 35 years in the business. So Tim was looking for somebody to purchase Quantum, and we found Vision Australia. They acquired us a couple of years ago, but we still continue to operate as a completely separate business division. So we're a completely separate business, separate customers, and we are actually mandated to go out and work with independents and other agencies. So that's our strengths, that's what we do really well, and that's what we're going to continue to do. We work in all sectors, the NDIS, of course, but also Department of Veterans Affairs. We do work with home care packages, My Aged Care, and job access as well. So all sectors, and also, of course, private customers, just people who are unfunded who just wish to purchase equipment to improve their quality of life. As I said, most of our work is in the field of vision impairment and blindness, but we do have, as I said, an overlap with reading difficulties that are not necessarily related to vision impairment. So, for example, dyslexia. That's an example where, of course, though in some cases it can be related to eyes and the neurology of the eye, it's also very much a brain issue there as well. But if you think about it, there's also a whole range of conditions that affect reading. You may not have thought that perhaps if somebody has a condition that twitches the eye, or perhaps with MS or motor neuron disease, often the neural system is affected as well, leading to visual fatigue when reading. So there's a very wide range of conditions that can result in impaired reading and writing as well, of course. Now, we're all familiar with carpal tunnel syndrome and all those sorts of things where people have difficulty writing or typing. We include all of these things in this overarching term called print disability. It's basically the inability to engage with print, whether it is electronic or whether it is actually written on paper. And then, of course, print applies to a much broader range than just books. It's also packaging and signage. It's everywhere around us. It's email, it's internet, and so on. So I think you can see that having a print disability covers a much broader range of people than just people with vision impairment. And I'd like to encourage you to think about that and just think about your clients and how many of them actually struggle with a print disability as well as their other disabilities as well. So, in the last few years, especially with the advent of the NDIS, we've collaborated very successfully with Allied Health, and we've been introduced to a whole heap of people that we never saw before. Whereas before, when we were concentrating on vision impairment, we were less in contact with people with mobility issues, people in wheelchairs and so on. Now, because of our collaborations, we're constantly in touch with people with complex disabilities. So we have to, and we very much enjoy collaborating with occupational therapists, physios, speechies, and we collaborate as co-consultants. So how do we collaborate? The very first thing I would like to mention is about referral pathways. So we're not overly bureaucratic, we're not very complex in the way we handle referrals to people or from people. It all starts with a telephone call. We have a conversation, we talk about the client. We don't need to know the client's name or their address, it can be hypothetical. But then if the OT feels that our expertise is required, we can then start talking about some kind of either a joint visit or a visit to our site support centre. That's usually a good place to start. Make an appointment to the site support centre, have a look at a range of things. It's a relaxed environment where people can try a few things. It may then lead to a home visit or even a pre-trial of equipment, particularly with NDIS. We need to make sure, the OT needs to make sure that the equipment has been trialled with the person, meets their goals and so on. my colleagues and myself, we contribute the expertise with the devices that we have, but also we're very, very experienced in this now. So we're very aware of the functional side of things and how it fits into NDIS goals and so on. So it can work very well, these collaborations. So the referral pathways are very straightforward. We don't need a referral from a GP or an eye specialist or anything like that. We can go straight away. So I think we may have a slide up of my lovely client, Margaret. This is just an example of a joint collaboration. So I think this is quite an interesting one. Now, Margaret, she is a war widow, and her OT was an OT that specialises in DVA work, Department of Veterans Affairs work. And we also had a referral from Margaret's ophthalmologist to see if we could do anything to improve her quality of life. So I did a joint visit with the OT, and she was very concerned about a couple of things. One was the very limited space that this lady had in her very small housing commission unit, and also psychologically the lady, Margaret, was very resistant to change. So we knew that we had to get it right when we actually visited, because at some point Margaret was likely to jack up and say, no, don't want to borrow it. So that's why we actually did a couple of conversations. We had a couple of chats before we went in with the equipment that we felt would be the most likely to succeed, and it did. So that device that's on the screen there is called the Clearview Flex. It's on an articulated arm. Margaret can just push it out of the way when she wants to eat or to look at her prescription pills or whatever she wants to look at, and just swing it back closer to her when she wants to read the TV guide or the newspaper or whatever. So that was an example of a successful collaboration that we did face-to-face. Now, it was during the end of COVID here in Queensland, so of course we both had the appropriate PPE, masks and gloves and so on, and we always do proper COVID screening before we do a home visit. What I'd like to talk a little bit about regarding COVID is how we've been able to collaborate and trial equipment remotely. Because, of course, that could be remotely in the sense that we're not allowed access to that person, or it could be that they are literally remote. COVID has been a great accelerator for us in ramping up our skills with Zoom and video phones, everything like that. So we've got this down pretty pat now. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Jeff Landers in our Sydney area. Jeff's got a few examples of how he's worked remotely with clients, mostly around NDIS, but also around aged care as well. Jeff, are you online?
I'm online, Peter. Yes, hopefully everyone can see me. Hello all. Yeah, so look, I'm based in the southern Sydney office, and a couple of examples I'd like to share with you of how I've collaborated with occupational therapists. I do face-to-face visits in the southern Sydney office. I also do them in people's homes, workplaces, and of course via telehealth now in the new COVID world. So the first example I want to share with you is a client that was actually in Lightning Ridge. So that's a remote location for those that are interstate. And I saw someone in the chat room ask, do we work remotely in remote regions? And the answer is yes. So in this particular one, it was a training session. So my colleague Rob had already done the first stage, which was assessing what type of product's going to help with the client. And the occupational therapist ultimately ordered a product called a Digimax, which is a 22-inch desktop magnifier. And Peter's going to show you some of these things later on. So the occupational therapist ordered it. So I had to do the training. So how did we do that? We did it. I was in my home in Sydney with the same device on my kitchen table. Mandy, the occupational therapist, was in the house sitting next to the client, and she had me on Zoom. So whilst I was showing them how everything works, button by button, they would then do it on Sharon. Sharon was the client. They'd do it on Sharon's device. So the outcome of that was that Sharon was receiving the training as if I was sitting next to her. The feedback at the conclusion of that is that it was an excellent session, and Darren had full understanding how to use her Digimax desktop magnifier. So that was a remote session. I'll share another example with you, which is a client that actually came face-to-face to the Southern Sydney office. And the client's name was Mark, and the occupational therapist was Cassandra. Now, Cassandra brought Mark in to see me because Mark has neurological disorder, and he can't see properly because of the neurological disorder. So his eyeballs look perfect, but he has certain quadrants in his vision is just not there. It just disappears no matter what he looks at. So if you imagine a clock face, he just couldn't see, for example, between 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, that side, no matter where you look. So if you turn your head, you always had this big gap. But also because of his neurological disorder, he had no feeling in his fingers. So he couldn't use an iPhone, or he was having trouble with a smartphone, and he also couldn't type and do things on his computer. So we went through a whole range of our different products, and Mark ended up getting 3 different products. One was Dragon software, Dragon Naturally Speaking, so he could dictate into his computer if he wanted to send emails and the like. The second thing he received was a Clearview Speech, which again is a desktop magnifier that has text to speech. And because he has no feeling in his fingers, he could still just tap the screens. Doesn't matter, because he wasn't having to feel it. He could just know that he was touching the screen, and it would do the text to speech. So it would convert the printed text into the spoken word. And the third thing he got was a product called Orcam My Eye, and it goes on glasses up on the side, and it will take a photo and read for you. So that's for use out of the home if you wanted to read a menu in a restaurant, or bus timetables, train timetables, and so on. So that particular client got 3 different devices through the NDIS with the assistance of his occupational therapist. And my role was just giving him the expertise of the different products and how they can help. So that's just a couple of examples: Zoom meeting, training, and face-to-face. By the way, on that one with Mark, I ended up going to his home and doing the installation and training and everything in his home after he received the products. So I'll hand back to you, Peter. Hopefully those are some real-life examples people can understand and appreciate.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff. That's some really good examples of how there's quite a broad range, not just equipment, but also considerations, neurological, physical, visual, mental, and so on. I should mention in passing before I forget that another area of difficulty is where people, where their first language is not English. That can also lead to issues accessing print as well, of course. So some of our technology for reading can help those people as well, because they can process and understand the spoken word better than they can actually process the written word. So, okay, well, what I'd like to do now is we're going to turn the camera around and introduce you to Tara and her team. And Tara is going to talk a little bit about how she's collaborated with us. And I don't know if you can start the camera first, Tara.
Is that okay, Matt?
Okay.
Wonderful. Now, Peter, I'll just encourage you to ask me any questions if there's anything.
Yeah,
you know.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Wonderful. So my name is Tara. I'm the lead occupational therapist at Adaptability Therapy. I've worked with Peter in Quantum now for probably 18 months. 99% of our clients are under the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and we do have a few under DBA and private clients as well. So I've got a little bit of a background of vision impairment, but since the NDIS started, I think I've probably had the same experiences as Peter, in that our client base has really broadened and widened, and we do see a lot of people who have are experiencing print disability who may not be vision impaired. So I always, when I've gone out to see clients and I've identified that there is an issue there with or a difficulty with print, I'm always really open and honest with my clients in letting them know that I have an awareness of products that are out there, but I certainly wouldn't class myself as an expert in the breadth of products that are available. So I found it really useful to have Peter and to have Quantum to call up to I guess, give a little bit of a rundown of my client and their needs, so what they're really struggling with, but also anything else that might overlay on top of that and impact what it is that we're looking at. So a really good example of that would be one of my clients, Fiona. So Fiona was a client who engaged me to complete a functional assessment. We weren't actually looking at equipment at that stage. But as part of my assessment, I picked up that, you know, Fiona's vision had deteriorated significantly in a really short period of time. So we were looking at maybe about, you know, 12 to 18 months. So it was something that was very distressing for her. And she really hadn't gotten to the stage where at that point she was open to looking at equipment. Talking to Fiona, it became really apparent as well that she had significant anxiety, but also other psychological conditions. And they sort of all together with this vision impairment that was fairly new had overlapped and meant that Fiona really hadn't accessed the community for a very long time, for probably 12 months, the 18 months that she'd been experiencing issues with her vision. So giving Peter a call, having a chat with Quantum about some of the options that we had with Fiona was really helpful, and really as well sounding out, you know, who else should be on this team, because it really does work best to have a team approach. So getting an orientation and mobility instructor involved, given that we would be looking at community access, you know, when Fiona was ready, when we were moving towards that as part of her treatment plan. So through sort of a 6-month process with Fiona, we started looking at different equipment. One of the things that she really connected with was the Orcam My Eye, because part of her feelings about her disability was one of vulnerability and one of being different. And she really didn't want to be carrying around anything that was bulky, anything that labelled her as different. She really didn't want to be whipping out an iPad or an iPhone or anything like that to be able to access text when out and about. So the process that we used, we identified that coming into the office probably wasn't the best first step for her, just given everything else that she had going on. So Peter actually came out to her home and went through the Orcam with her there, which was really helpful. And we could kind of move at her pace as well. After that initial visit, she did really well in the home environment, but we wanted to see how she would go out in the community with this device, because there's a lot of different things that can happen in the community. And we just wanted to make sure, I suppose, that we weren't layering something on top and making kind of exacerbating the anxiety that she was already experiencing. So we brought the Orcam out into the community with an orientation and mobility instructor and a support person for her, and it worked really, really well. So she was able to use, you know, some of the strategies that we'd been working on for her anxiety. So things like, you know, grounding techniques, you know, taking deep breaths and really slowing everything down, plus the Orcam on top, which is a really non-invasive, you know, a device that's quite small, and she did really well. So she managed really well. She was able to navigate her local environment, able to navigate the shops, was able to get to the shopping centre, identify products. And these were all things that I think we probably take for granted, but she hadn't been able to do for 18 months. So this was a device that was really life-changing for her. So having a chat with Fiona, we then went through the process of applying for this device through the NDIS, so completing a level 3 4AT form. So when I write forms for any equipment, but particularly when we're looking at things that are more specialised or more unusual that I think an NDIA representative may not have seen before, I always just bring it back to really humanising the client, really talking about what's important for them and taking it back to, you know, their goals and what this is going to help them achieve. So that's what I did with Fiona, and we were, you know, very lucky and got the Orcam through the first time, which was excellent for her. So we got the Orcam, you know, Fiona still uses it sort of in her day-to-day, which is excellent. So uses it at home, but also does take it out into the community. And so initially I created a bit of a graded program for her to step out into the community with supports, you know, and transition quite slowly, but we really found that the device gave her a lot of confidence And she was really actually motivated. She was out catching buses within like a week or two of receiving it independently. She felt like she could problem solve. If she got stuck, she could figure out where she was and how to get home, which is something that she hadn't been able to do before with the vision impairment. So it worked really well.
Great. Okay. Just going to zoom in shot as well. Thanks very much, Tara, and I think that's pretty much very similar examples in other collaborations as well. You're looking at the whole picture, you're looking at every aspect of their functioning and so on, especially the psychological aspects, the social aspects. And we're trying to fit into that thought process too. We're learning from you guys about how you think in this process as well.
Yes, definitely. And one thing that I found really helpful as well, because you've looked at a lot of equipment and a lot of equipment assessments and reports, you gave me a lot of really good ideas about low-level AT to try, so that we can show that actually rules and accessibility features, they're not for everyone, and they certainly didn't work for us, but for Fiona. That was really helpful.
Yes. So I think what we might do now is we might actually start looking at some of the equipment. And we're going to start by doing a pan around the Site Support Centre. We may as well do it from. No, I'm not going to. So we lay out the Site Support Centre. If you want to just do a quick pan around, just. With what we call our desktop electronic magnifiers, what we call our portable electronic magnifiers, our text-to-speech systems here, and then we also have a variety of Braille devices, including electronic Braille, integrated Braille with laptops, scanners and so on, and a range of optical magnifiers, which we have over here. And we're going to be starting with optical magnifiers. That's always the very first thing we would start with, especially with older people, is how people can use a relatively inexpensive optical magnifier. If it's not strong enough, they may need to move to an electronic one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some volunteers from Tara's team. Can I have one person for this? Anybody? Okay. Right. Okay. So one of the things we get constantly asked is for a really huge lens that we can put over the Sydney Morning Herald, and they'll be able to read just as perfectly as they did before. But we can't actually do that. The biggest lens that we actually do is on this magnificent lamp here. And it's actually also the weakest lens that we do. It's only about 1.75 times magnification. So this turns out, because of the huge field of view, to be really popular for people with only minor vision impairment. So Jess, if you just wanted to switch it on with the switch there, you'll notice how good the illumination that's built in is. And then just bend it so that it's pretty much on top of the book, like that. And I don't know if the camera can see through that at all. But here now we're getting hands-free magnification and illumination of the task, which is the reading task here. Really handy if somebody's sitting in an armchair, especially an armchair that they, maybe they've got lots of mobility issues, and they simply want to be able to swing over their hands-free lens when they want over their lap when they want to read or do some knitting or something like that. So this is a very popular item. We do actually do a lot through the Department of Veterans Affairs with these kind of items, and my colleague Leanne will talk about that in a moment. But just want to have a play with some of these here if you want to pop one up. And so there's actually a measurement written on there which says 24 diopter. So this is actually quite a strong magnifier. And if you just flip the switch there, down, we need to change the batteries.
Let's get another one. Oh.
Did it go on? Oh, yeah,
it's just the brightness of the light above it.
Okay. So here's the task lighting there. And task lighting is super crucial for most of our people with low vision. Now, what I'm going to get you to do is we'll just try with the book here. See if you can actually. Can you actually form an image with that? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we're still at a fairly comfortable reading distance there. You're getting magnifications of around about 5 times there. How about we go to a bigger lens? Maybe you think a bigger lens might be better. Yeah.
Better.
That's better. Now, why is it better?
I can see more of the text as well. It's still quite a light device as well. So if you've got anyone that's got any arthritic joints or anything, it's probably still quite good. But I like the fact that I can still see more text, so I'm not having to move my hand so much personally.
And it feels quite light in your hand?
Yeah.
Okay, which is important when you're 92 and maybe you've got some. They're not 92. Okay. Now let's just try now with the smallest one here.
Oh wow. Okay. This is very light. Very, very light. Oh, no batteries though. That's all right. Yeah.
Can you form an image with that? No. Because as the strength of the lens increases, unfortunately the focal length decreases. So you actually have to put that almost in your eye and bring the paper almost on your nose to read it. No. It doesn't work for you?
No.
Okay. So this is just to illustrate that people often ask us for the strongest lens we do, but when we show them the actual physical difficulty of having to hold it in your eye and hold the paper on your nose, they quickly tire with that sort of thing. We would very rarely be selling these, except to people who already use them and are very habituated to using them. We tend to go straight to electronic, and we'll show you some of that. So we have a range of these. We, all of us consultants carry these in our cars. So we always have them available. We'll always try the inexpensive options first, of course. Similarly, and Kara, I think you mentioned that why not use your iPhone to magnify with the camera? And for somebody that's already pretty handy with an iPhone, they already pinch zoom in, that can be an option too. But generally the people we see, they're not going to be handy with an iPhone. So they need something much more physically designed for them. What we're going to do, we need another volunteer here, or maybe a couple actually, for the portable electronics. Might bring back the chairs as well. So what we're going to do is I'll do a very brief overview, and then we'll get the OTs to actually be playing and fiddling. And so, of course, people would prefer the very smallest thing because it's so portable. And this is a Clover 3, and as you can see, it's extremely portable. So you could take this to the restaurant or to the shops and get magnification of items. We can change the colours by pressing a button so that we can have very high contrast black and white or yellow and black. And a lot of people with vision issues prefer high contrast. They find that easier to see. Less visually fatiguing as well if it's got a black background. Very handy, but you'll notice that I cannot fit the whole column of a newspaper on the screen. So there's going to be a lot of left and right motion to read. You would not be reading a book with something like this, but very handy out and about in the top pocket or in the handbag. Most of the work that we do as consultants is about negotiating what screen size suits their main function. So if they are out and about a lot, we would be definitely looking at the lightweight ones, even if they're sacrificing some size of field of view. But if they're very much reading in one location, we might be looking at some of the larger screens here. So, for example, we can use these much larger screens, so 12-inch screens, and get much larger field of view on those screens like that. This is a 13-inch. All of these are battery powered, and that's one of the definitions of a portable is that it is battery powered. Rechargeable batteries, they generally last around about 3 hours on one charge. Okay, so I'm just going to get you guys to have a play with this. Just try some of the controls. By the way, I haven't trained anybody how to do this yet, so this is all a learning curve. So what's happening here is that the device has to be moved over the paperwork, and then there's some tactile buttons here with the noise feedback that control the magnification. And so let's see how high we can go with that. And of course, as we go up to these very large magnifications, you have less and less on the screen. But could you also lift it up and just see whether it's heavy or not?
No, it's still reasonably light.
So
but
that
you wouldn't want to be
yeah. So it's
lugging it around the community.
No. But you'd be moving it from room to room, to the kitchen bench, or to the somewhere, another desk. Press that button to find out.
Oh yeah.
So you can see that the quality of the high contrast is fantastic now. Now, all of our devices, or our electronic magnifiers, have got these options for different colours and contrasts. Very important for low vision conditions.
Yeah. Will it automatically switch off if you leave it slightly on standby?
Yes, so all of the devices to save power will go to sleep if you leave them for a few minutes, and we can adjust how long that time is. And another thing that we consider is whether the device has got buttons or touch screens. So this device here, same sort of size screen, but it's actually a touch screen, so that you can actually pinch zoom and so on.
Yeah.
Depends on the client,
Yeah.
Some will be more inclined one way and some the other way.
And this one's got raised features too on the buttons.
Yeah, yeah.
How long do the charge typically last?
Well,
Most of
it
these.
depends on the device, about 3 hours normally.
Okay.
So, yeah. For this one here, that's right, you can just lift that up. So lift the whole device up and place it onto the thing. There we go. And you can either touch the screen, the on-screen button, or you could use pinch zoom, like this.
This is where we realise I don't have that ability. They can hold it down, do you?
It might be as far out as it goes.
That's actually that one, so it's quite large. Have a look at the actual text.
So you can't, yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Great. Now, some of these devices have also got the ability to speak out loud as well. I don't have time to go into that level of detail for each device, but I will be sort of combining that description when we go over to some of the desktop machines. This particular device does have the ability to also read a piece of paper on the side.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so you can either handwrite in this area, or you can actually capture a whole page and have it read out loud and highlight it on the screen at the same time. And because it's so transportable, it's very handy anywhere within the home, but also for studying, in the workplace and so on, when you're moving from to a meeting or something like that. So this is called the Compact 10 with speech. Now, before I show you the desktop machines, I'd just like to introduce you to Leanne, and she's going to talk a little bit about the process with the Department of Veterans Affairs when we're prescribing particular aids.
Okay, hi. So with DVA, Department of Veterans Affairs, very simple process. So basically, if your client needs to just have a handheld magnifier or the lamp with magnification, that's a very simple process. We don't need prior approval with DVA for that. So Quantum can actually do up a sales order, do a voucher, and the client gets it, so they're not out of pocket at all. So that's for those two, so the vouchers. The next level is for these ones here. I'll show you. So basically for the electronics, small electronics, so Clover 3, Clover 5, and there is a Clover 7, which we don't have here at the moment, so 7-inch. And those three can go on a direct order form. So again, we don't need prior approval for those, and the OTs can actually sign off on those as well if you've got your number, provide a number. And then after those ones, from the 10 up to the big desktops, to the OCR devices, that will need prior approval. So what Quantum does then is liaises with either their ophthalmologist, low vision clinic, optometrist, and we will give them a form to fill out. The doctor will fill those out, or the ophthalmologist, optometrist, and then send it back to us. Then we'll do just a quote, send that off to DVA, wait for the approval. And then once we get the approval back, we can then have the product and we can deliver it to the client depending on what it is. If it's a small handheld, we can just post out. If it's one of these and the client you think might need help, we will deliver it and then show them how to use it. Same with the larger desktop ones, we will actually deliver, set it up and show them how to use it. So it's really a very simple process with DVA.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Leanne. I'd like to just show you some of the larger machines now. So as you can see, we have quite a range of what we call desktop electronic magnifiers. The largest we do has got a 24-inch screen. And of course, the obvious benefit of that is that we can actually fit a great deal at large magnification across the screen. So we have a simple dial to increase the magnification or decrease it, and we can change colours by pressing a button within the dial. The same sort of range of options that we have on the portable electronics, but we get such a beautiful field of view that we have people with very little useful vision who can still read, albeit a little slower, of course, at these very large magnifications. There's a variety of extra features as well. We can put line markers across the screen. That's just done with by rotating the control pad. We can actually press a button and put line markers just to keep things straight, especially bank statements and that sort of thing. The controls are still designed to be used by someone even into their 90s. Most of our customers that use these large desktops are very elderly. Of course, we have them used in the workplace as well, and indeed in schools, but you'll see that these devices are pretty much desk-bound, and that's why we call them desktops. You have to bring your reading materials to this location and read. To facilitate reading, we have this concept of a sliding tray. We technically call it an XY table. It can move at the X-axis and the Y-axis. And that is to facilitate the smooth motion of books and so on the tray itself. We can actually dampen that motion down with a couple of clutches at the front of the machine, and that will actually tend to keep it on the row without skittering about. And that's very important for people with very poor gross motor skills. And a lot of our older customers have got very jerky motion, so we can dampen it down with the clutch here so that it tends to stay on the row. Now we do find that we have a lot of people that can successfully use these electronic magnifiers, but equally there's a lot of people that get motion sickness with these large magnifications, or they just get visually fatigued, or they're just reading too slowly and they want to read faster. So we have an option on some of our devices, including this one here, to convert.
Position the text inside the window and tap the screen.
To convert the image to a spoken version. So we just simply line up the document, tap the screen, and then there is a computer in this device, so it doesn't do anything else except this speaking. And then in a moment, it'll start to speak.
Source 2.
150 grams
And I can make it
peeled
bigger.
and diced. 200 grams tinned salmon, drained sea salt and freshly ground black pepper, 1 bunch parsley. Wash.
And I can pause it, I can increase the speed, I can change the voice to male, female. I can even change the voice to a different language. But it won't translate from English to Italian. It would have to be originally Italian that we put under there, but then it will speak it in Italian if we change to an Italian voice. And this particular machine has, I think, 35 different languages that it can speak. And I do know that actually when we tried it with native speakers, they all said that it's very good in their native language. So the other thing we can do here is we can actually use a swipe gesture to move the image around and just start from another
Mix
place.
together the breadcrumbs, parmesan and remaining parsley. Roll the fish cakes in the flour, dip in the beaten egg and then...
Very straightforward. And so even for older people, a very straightforward way of having a bimodal approach, that is speech synchronized with magnification. This is called the Clearview speech, and it's the top end of our electronic magnifiers. But some of these features are also incorporated in our portable electronic magnifiers too. Now, when Jeff was on the line, he was talking about the Digimax, and here's an example. This is the Digimax here. Now, this one has the camera mounted in front of the screen rather than behind the screen. The advantage of that is that you can actually see, I'll just switch it to, switch the mode to natural color. And here's the colors you can switch through. I could have done the same with this keypad on the side, they're replicated these controls. But now we can be working, I'll switch the light on. We can be working and seeing our real hands at the same time as we see magnified hands. Very useful for people that need to see their real hands when they're doing crosswords or filling in forms, or maybe doing a little bit of hobby work, a bit of knitting or something like that. It's also possible to rotate the camera and aim it across the room. So in a classroom situation, the student could be looking at the teacher or at the blackboard. So a lot of, you can see there could be an awful lot of usages for this kind of device. Many functional uses for the Digimax. So we've talked about magnification, and our job, of course, is to advise the health people that we're collaborating with. But where we from our experience, we feel appropriate products might be for the person in mind. But as I mentioned, that some people are beyond magnification, or maybe magnification doesn't help, they still need to access print. And we have some audio approaches to that. I'm going to turn the camera around on my cameraman, Michael Palmer, and he's going to talk about some of those text-to-speech options, the Clear Reader and the Orcam range. Over to you, Mike. Okay, right.
Devices that can actually read to us. Traditionally, we've always used a device such as this one. This is a Q reader. In a simple form, it's a device that has a camera on it that will read text that's presented underneath it, and it's got nice tactile buttons on the top of it that we can activate it, and a speaker system across the front. It's very good for the elderly because it's a simple process to use it. This particular one is a portable one, so if mum comes to visit the daughter, she can bring a device as well. But you can imagine this sort of thing is terrible if you had to go to Coles and find out what a product is. You can't walk around with a big handbag. So if we put this in the washing machine, we get the Orcam products that shrink it down. Now with the Orcam products, there's two that we have at the moment that we sell. The Orcam II, the famous one that I know a lot of you have seen. And then there's the newer one that you may not have seen, the Read. The difference between the two primarily is that the Read really is aimed towards perhaps those people that actually can see but can't read the text. So dyslexic people, people with brain injuries, things like that. And it's a really simple device to use. It's got simple tactile buttons across the top of it. And I'm not sure if we can actually
I can
see that. Yeah. There's a laser pointer.
Our products and services enable people to read the mail, books and magazines, share family photos.
So it's a similar process to what we saw on the larger devices, except for it's entirely portable. You can stick it in your pocket. Great for that sort of thing. The Rolls-Royce version, the Read, the MyEye Pro that we have now, it's a device to be hands-free. So we provide a pair of glasses that comes with it, or attachments that you can provide onto your own glasses, because they have little magnets on the back. And what happens is it can attach to your glasses. Now, the beauty with this device is that it does recognise hand signals. So it recognises a pointed finger. So I can point to text to activate it. It's got a touch panel on the side also. And this touch panel, I can activate it to read entire books and things like that, rather than just spot reading. It does also recognise hand gestures of when I hold my arm up, and it'll tell me the time and things like that. It will tell me colours, recognise money, which is a handy thing to have. So it's a nice, simple device to use. Has a little speaker at the back and the camera at the front with the touch panel on the side. And you may have heard it click when I've just done it. I'll just stop it. So if I point to the piece of text here, I can.
Our products and services enable people to read the mail, books and magazines, share family photos.
So it's a nice, simple device to be able to use. What we do is we consider things when we're using it, how the person may be able to handle it. You know, if they've got jitters and shakes or head movements, perhaps we've got to consider how it might sit, because being a camera, you've got to be able to the camera's got to be able to see the text. All these OCR technology or the optical character recognition technology interprets the data that it's seeing. So the beauty of the OrCam, because you can point at things, you can develop a little mental map of what you're seeing. So a human eye can make sense of that and just read the articles that we want to see. And the OrCam itself, by pointing around, I can direct it to specific areas. The newer version that we've got now, the Pro, has extra capabilities that is just starting to come through. We're just starting to learn how to use it, where it has the ability to help us orientate with things around the room. And it also will help us to orientate the page. So we can ask it questions to read dates out to us, to read out the values to us, to read headlines. It's a very handy, smart device to have. So it's far superior than anything else that's on the market currently. Quite a simple device to use. And I might see if I can get it to show you some of the things that it can do, just quickly by what I'll get it to do is, let's have a look. Yeah, so what I'll do is that, because it's capable of seeing people.
A young woman is in front of you. However, you must not see his daily work life, bluntly execute her that.
And so it's all Leanne, and rightly so, pointed out a young woman is in front of me. And also it did see other text within the room, and it would read that out also. So these are the little skills that we would teach people when they get it, because it is a skill to be able to use it. And we teach these skills to be mindful of what other text is around the room, and how it's going to interpret that text and read it to me. I can be out in the street with it, and I can point towards signage, and when it recognises my finger, it can read that signage out to me. So street signs, going to Coles, I can look at those aisles and get an indication that if I'm going to the right aisle and things like that. So it's a very, very handy device to have.
Mike, one of the participants has just asked whether you have to wear glasses or whether it can use any glasses.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the glasses themselves all can provide a pair of glasses, which I've just got over there. I'll show you in a second. They provide you with a pair of glasses. But you don't actually need to have a pair of glasses. And because the Allcam is not an optical device, it doesn't help you to see. It does help you to interpret the text in front of you. So with that in mind, the glasses don't, it doesn't matter if they've got lenses in there or not, but they do provide a smart little pair of glasses. But if you don't like their glasses and you want to get your own glasses, or you've got a nice pair of glasses that you used to use and you've put away in the drawer, we can fit the little magnet system to the side of it. I'm not sure if you can see that. A little close. Yeah, good. As I have to my reading glasses, so and it's quite simple to attach it to it. It's a nice, easy thing to do. So,
what about sunglasses, Mike?
Sunglasses, definitely. One of the considerations with sunglasses, though, is that we look at the thickness of the temple. The ideal thickness is something like that, but if it's some of these modern surfy type sunglasses with really big thick sides on it, it's perhaps not suitable to have the magnet on it. But it's ideal to have on a pair of sunglasses. Often we pop it on their own glasses in a pair of sunglasses, because Allcam do provide multiple magnets that you can affix to your own glasses. So it's very handy.
Yeah, somebody's also asked, Mike, is it somebody's asked the price, and we can get to that in a moment, but we've also asked, is it possible to use Bluetooth headphones or earphones rather than the speakers?
Definitely. So with both of the devices, they have a Bluetooth connection capability. And what that means is that if you're in a noisy environment, you're out in the shopping centre, you can get those little Bluetooth earbuds connected to it and use that. Also with certain, we can use it in conjunction with hearing aids, and sometimes with hearing aids we need a third device that will connect the two, but we have connected them with hearing aids also. So that's a very good question. Yeah, definitely. The other thing that happens with the Allcam is that it has Wi-Fi built into it, so it can, if various updates become available, it connects to your Wi-Fi system and updates itself when it's plugged into power. So it's a very, very clever device.
Yeah. But Mike, an important point about that is that it's not internet connected. And there's an important consideration about that. Maybe you can talk about with NDIS.
So concerns around privacy and things like that are a big issue, particularly with because it does have facial recognition capability. So it's possible for me to program in my carer's face and add a name to it. And when I do that, it's taking multiple photographs of the person. Now, what's important with that is that these photographs are not photographs traditionally as we know it. All it is a bunch of biometric data that the device is measuring to recognise the person, and that's only stored locally on the device. It doesn't go up into the cloud, it doesn't go into the internet or anything like that. So from a privacy perspective, it's a solo device and it's independent of the internet. Now, the other thing that's important with that too is that it does not rely on the internet at all to work. So if you're in a car park in the bottom of a shopping centre, unlike a mobile phone or something like that, it does not need the internet to work. It's totally independent of that. So very clever.
Yeah, Peter, did you want to get into the pricing now, or Mike, or talk about that?
We'll mention it in this case for the Allcam. We haven't talked about pricing. All of our pricing is available on our website. And at the end, Rebecca, you might be able to just have a quick look at that. But for the Allcam range, Mike, if you can just outline the prices for those.
So with the two devices, the Allcam Read, off the top of my head, is $3,250. So that's the newer device. That's all the handheld device. The Allcam My Eye, with all the functions that we saw, that's capable of doing all these special things, is $7,250 now, plus the training, of course. Yeah. So it's a lot more with a lot more functions. So.
Yeah. And that puts the Allcam Read into the mid-cost range for NDIS. So it can be applied for in that up to $5,000 range. Whereas, of course, the Allcam My Eye is obviously, it has to attract an AT report at level 4, I think. Yes.
And there is a sort of lower level Allcam My Eye now as well, with just some of the reading and other features. So yeah, we can always quote and talk to people about pricing.
Do any of our OTs here have any questions about the OrCam? Would they like to have a play?
You said the price plus the training. So what duration of the training is it?
Typically, that's variable depending on the person. We find that often some people pick it up very fast and they get the concepts around it. Other people, it might take them a bit of time, but the thing that we're very cautious about when we do train people is that we don't want to overwhelm them with information, because the OrCam can be extremely technical or it can be very simple depending on their level of interest. Often we will spend an hour and a half, an hour, something like that is enough to get them going for what they need for probably 95% of their needs. We do try to give them an overview of everything that it can do, so that gives us a bit of an idea of what they want. Some of the features, some of the things that it does, they might want to do that maybe once a year. It's rare, so we custom align the training for them.
And it's also available through DBA as well, so which is good. Yeah.
I should also mention, to turn that back on myself, that we also have had some success in education with the OrCam as well. So we've recently completed the Department of Education in Queensland has recently completed a trial of the OrCam in 10 schools across Queensland. And the Department of Education was looking primarily at children that were struggling with reading, but not related to vision. So they were struggling for other reasons. They were 2 or 3 years below their peers. Maybe they had attention deficit disorders. A couple of the students in the trial actually were on the spectrum, ASD. But for whatever reason, they were struggling to keep up with their peers, and the department wanted to see whether a device like the OrCam would actually improve their engagement with curriculum. So we actually lent the department 10 devices, and they were put into schools across the whole of the state. Some of them were metro, some of them were rural, and a couple of them were very, very remote. I had the privilege of actually doing the installation up at Arakoon and Porncaror up in the Cape, which was a great experience for me. Trained these teachers and the kids how to use the OrCam, and then basically left them to their own devices with the teachers to see whether they would be better engaged with curriculum. The results came out just recently, and they were pretty much overwhelmingly positive. Some of the results were children were improving their reading grade by a year, even with a short use of the OrCam. And it seemed to be around the fact that the child they were in control of their reading. They weren't relying on a teacher aid, they weren't inhibited or feeling like they were at the back of the class. And what they found in a number of cases was the child, because they were actually then up with their reading, they were listening to the text and so on, which includes digital text too, because it can read iPads and computers and so on. The children were then able to interact with the actual subject that was being discussed, and they were able to engage. So there was a remarkably good result in that educational environment. And we see this also for people socially. Tara was talking about her client who started to blossom and engage more in community. And we see many of the same things with our clients with the OrCam, that they're finding a degree of autonomy and engagement with community, which is quite remarkable.
We've had a couple more questions, Peter, about the OrCam. One of John has asked, how do you deliver training to people in regional areas?
Oh, that's a great question. So I may just skip straight to one of the case studies there. So some of the same techniques that we use for COVID with telehealth translate really well for training as well. So my colleague Jeff, he talked a little bit about how he was able to pre-train the occupational therapist so that she could actually be on site. What we do obviously need is we need to have somebody there with the participant. Now that could be a family member, it could be a disability support worker, it could be an occupational therapist, depending on who's available. Obviously, an OT or an allied health professional would be ideal. What we do is, well, I'll give you an example of the one, a recent one in Darwin. So, Jessica Balmer up at Yanoia Lane, they're a practice up there in Darwin. They had a client who wanted to trial the OrCam. So what we did was we shipped an OrCam up to Jessica. I did a little bit of pre-training with her over Zoom. Then she then gave the OrCam to the family, and we had the disability support worker and the participant on one Zoom. We had Jessica on another Zoom, and me as the trainer on a third Zoom. And so this way, I could actually demonstrate just as Michael was just now, and the client would have the OrCam, but they were supported by somebody with sight. So this is an example of how we can do it. It works very, very well. I've done something similar with a client who was totally blind, and she was using a computer device, a Braille device, and her disability support worker didn't know anything about Braille, but of course she could see and she could assist me teach the person, making sure that she was pressing the right keys and so on. So that's how we would deal with remote. The same occupational therapist then had an even harder one for me, which was she was visiting a very remote community. Beck, I don't know if you've got the slide there for
I've got that up at the moment.
Okay, so what I was able to do, again, I was able to over Zoom teach Jessica the basics of the Mountbatten Braille writer. Probably did that for about an hour and a half. She then felt confident enough to take that out to community, and she was then setting it up and instructing the child. We can then support that where we can, as long as we've got obviously Zoom or some connection like that. But there's an example where this particular occupational therapist really wanted to engage. She wanted to learn to quite a deep level our sort of equipment. Not all occupational therapists or allied health professionals would want to do that, but in some cases, because they're on the ground, they're in remote communities, they would actually step up and become quite proficient in those sorts of devices.
One other question about the OrCam before we move on. Can it detect moving objects such as a car?
No. So it's not to be relied on as a mobility aid in that sense. We really don't want people to think of this as a device that could replace a mobility aid like a guide dog or a cane. It's at the moment limited to detecting a set of objects, and even this is still fairly experimental. Like it'll tell you that there's a coffee cup in front of you, that it's to the left of your field of view or to the right. It will tell you that there's a doorway in front of you or stairs going up and down. And there will be increasingly they will add those sorts of features. But what it is not an object describer or an environment describer. Its main function is to read text, recognize people, currency, but some of these extra features are being experimented with and will be very useful to people with very limited vision. So there are other technologies that can help people with guiding and describing. So there's a technology called IRA, which is basically a camera that people can transmit to a sighted agent, and the sighted agent can see through the camera and describe in the earpiece what they're seeing. But that's a human being, of course. Many pros and cons to that. And it's not that one technology is the be-all and end-all. OrCam has many, many advantages. Michael, you described about how it doesn't require an internet connection. So it's not going to suffer from dropouts or anything like that. There's always pros and cons with these things. When we're working with people who are looking at the whole of the person, these considerations have to be taken into account when we're advising about the best technology.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Peter. There were a couple of other questions about some of the other devices, but we might get to those at the end if people don't mind.
Yeah, we might save that to the Q&A.
Yeah.
So,
I think, and one other one about
yes, I'd like to talk about. There was another case study which I thought was quite interesting. That's the one with Robert. Have you got the slide? Okay.
Yes, I do.
So Robert has multiple disabilities. He's in a wheelchair. He has some intellectual impairment, a lot of speech difficulty, so communication issues, and he has very limited use of his upper. He can't actually lift his hand much higher than desk height. So he is very homebound. He wanted to have some more enjoyment of reading independently instead of being read to by his mother. So we trialled him with various of the reading devices. And there were some issues, for example, with the OrCam about him being able to control it because of his very limited use of hands and arms. The one that he really responded very well to was the clear speech, which is one of the bigger devices that I started with. And so the issue there was, though he could follow the speech, how was he going to control it? How is he going to stop it? Because it's got touch screen controls. So we tried an external keypad, which would allow him some simple buttons to press to stop, pause, and so on. And he was fairly successful with that. But in the end, we found that he could actually raise his back scratcher. You know those extensible telescopic things with a little hand on the end of it? It was actually just a gimmick in a toy. It wasn't really using as a back scratcher. But he could actually use that and tap the on-screen buttons. And the screen would respond to the tap of the handle. And he was able to control the machine that way. So that's something that the OT and I arrived at. We were trying various things, and that worked perfectly well for him. The OT was able to arrange the correct height table and so on, and we put an articulated arm at the back so that it could be the correct height and all that sort of thing. So that was a learning curve for me. I was, of course, I was not familiar with all of the various physical issues and the speech issues and so on. But as a collaboration, we were able to find a really good solution for him. And it's certainly improved his quality of life. He's certainly enjoying being able to read independently. And again, that was an NDIS process that he went through with a successful outcome. Okay, so Rebecca, I think we might throw it open to some more questions, I think. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody of our team here have any questions that they'd like to ask? Okay. Oh, well, while we're waiting for questions to come through, I might just zoom in on, I haven't really shown anything to do with the computer. So I might just show you a little bit of on access to computers. And I'm deliberately showing this on a laptop just so that you're not seeing a big screen, because, of course, people with vision impairment, one thing they might want to do is magnify the screen, and our Zoom text program will do that. We can magnify to a great degree what's on the screen. And we can also make the mouse pointer more pronounced. And I don't know if you can see, but we also can apply some extra locators to draw the eye towards the mouse pointer. And people, particularly with tunnel vision, find it very difficult to find the mouse. But if they can find a straight line, then they can follow that line to the mouse pointer.
Okay.
Another thing that we can do here, apart from magnifying the screen, as you can see, as I move around the screen, we can actually keep the mouse pointer in view, is we can actually have it read as well. So I'm going to switch on the speaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got a few questions coming through. Yeah, but that's
okay.
Volume 51%.
And then, as I move around the screen, I can actually have it read out whatever I'm pointing to.
Text magnify reader voice. Mouse echo set to hover mode.
So as I hover over things,
Reader.
it will actually just tell me what I'm just pointing at. This can be particularly useful.
Zoom text.
Just to reinforce where they may be not perceiving straight away visually. This will reinforce what they're actually arriving at.
Voice.
And that same voice can be used to read out loud whole emails, internet pages. As you type, it's also echoing back what you're typing as well. And this Zoom text program and similar programs that we sell can give us very good access to Windows computers. We also have a range of large print keyboards with letters that are 4 times larger in high contrast for people that have got low vision there.
okay. Thanks for that, Peter. Yeah, I think Jeff might have tried to answer this, but one lady was asking, does the Digimax have a longer mounting option? They've got someone in mind who might wanting to use something with a weaving machine. So I don't know whether we've got...
The Digimax has got a fixed arm, though of course you can raise the whole system. You could even suspend the whole system in an appropriate wall clamp or something like that. It's not a particularly heavy electronic magnifier. But we also have a range of cameras that are just on their own without a screen, that they are much smaller and they can actually interface with screens or laptops and so on. And maybe that might be a more appropriate solution because it's much more compact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Another person's asked, they're in the ACT, how do we access your services locally? So that might be one for Jeff and I.
Maybe Jeff could answer that. Or...
Yeah, thank you. I just typed back into the chat, Rod. I look after the ACT, so I've just put up my direct mobile number. You can contact me, but Rebecca will put up the company's contact details towards the end. And it's just a matter of reaching out to us, and then we'll, as Peter explained the process, we'll just discuss what we can do to help you with your client.
Yeah. We've got another question. Does the cursor location assistance on the software, on the Zoom text require software, or is it in the settings of the computer? That was, we were showing Zoom text there, I think, weren't you?
No, it's within Zoom text. So Windows doesn't have those features. Windows does have some features to make the mouse pointer bigger, but it doesn't have those locator features. So that's where programs like Zoom text are superior. They can be highly customized for people. And it's not just for people with low vision either. Some of those Zoom text features for reading are very useful for people with literacy issues as well. Mm-hmm. Even some of the simple changes to the background colors that Zoom text can do can help people with dyslexia who benefit from different color schemes. The same people that might benefit from Erlen lenses often benefit from having different color washes that Zoom text can provide.
Mm. Somebody had asked, do you have any suggestions for clients with impaired upper limb function but communication issues to facilitate phone use? I don't know whether that be the case for Siri or voice to text.
Mike, do you have any?
Yeah, the best one would probably be using Google or Siri.
Mm.
So if there's no upper limb movement at all and it's all voice activation, for on the telephone, was it, Beck?
It was for the phone. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, so voice activation on your phone. So using the likes of Siri and Google would be the best thing for that.
Yeah. Okay, there was a few more questions, or just finding. Let's have a look. Okay, so what does it cost for an assessment or trial session with Quantum?
Okay, so again, it depends a little bit on the funding arrangement. So with the NDIS, we charge it pretty much at the standard NDIS rates for occupational therapy. So $190 per hour, and all the usual NDIS rates for travel and all those sorts of things. So we are actually an NDIS provider as well as an NDIS supplier. So when we're quoting for training, for example, we can we'll quote at again $190 an hour for training there. Some of our devices we will quote different prices for training because we've arrived at a sort of package price. So $300 I think for the ORCAM, that would be just our flat rate for the training for the ORCAM. But yes, so we're in line with the NDIS guidelines there. With job access, it's fairly similar. And again, we much the same arrangement. So we negotiate how many hours we need to configure software and equipment, and then to train the worker as well. So it's fairly straightforward, and again with travel as well. So yeah, we try to keep it simple where we can, and within guidelines.
Yeah. But if people are just browsing our showrooms, yeah,
that's right. We look at it that way. So if people come to us and come to our site support centres, spend an hour and a half just here browsing and picking our brains, try things out, we don't charge for that. We call that like preliminary browsing. It's more when we get down to the nitty-gritty that they particularly want to assess or trial a piece of equipment for NDIS or job access and so on. That's when we would quote for those sort of training installation type charges.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Oh, somebody did have a bit more of a question about the facial recognition option in the ORCAM. So would it say mum is in front of you?
It could say mum is in front of you, because the person that, when they actually take the initial photograph, the ORCAM will say, please name the person after the beep. And normally you would say Michael or Leanne, but you could say whatever you liked. And some of our clients have done.
Yeah, how can we?
Yeah.
So yeah, we have had some other questions about if people have got motor control issues and unable to speak and little use of upper limbs. Yeah, I guess we work with a more tricky situation, but.
Yes, we have to work closely with the specialists on that. And there's so many factors there that we would be very much guided by them as well. So I did have one where the lady was in a wheelchair, again with upper limb issues, and we were trying to work out a way that she could operate the ORCAM. Now that the ORCAM Read has come out, which has got buttons on it, that she could just point like a torch, that would be a solution for her. But there are other people, as you say, who perhaps have only got head movement that might need some kind of switching system. We're open to all sorts of experiments there, so I'm sure that there could be some solutions for those more complex cases.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I will just share I think I've covered all the questions that people have put in the chat, so thanks for all those. I will just share our contact details. So I might get back to.
And while those are up, I'll just wrap up from my end, Rebecca, if that's all right.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the quiz as well. So.
Okay. So look, I just from here, from the Site Support Centre in Brisbane, thank you very much for attending today. I hope this has been useful to you. Some people, I hope, would be encouraged to engage more with people with print disability. At whatever level they choose, maybe they would simply like just to refer on to us as the experts, or maybe they would like to acquire some knowledge themselves. So I hope that's encouraged you to deal more with print disability. It's certainly very prevalent. Oftentimes I think we're so focused on the primary disability. The person is in a wheelchair, they have an intellectual impairment, and we forget how much that person might prioritise their inability to read or write. how that, by being able to do that, they would open up their engagement with other people through social media, through going out into the community more, being more autonomous. So I'm hoping that perhaps one of the key takeaway messages would be that you might think about print disability as something that the participant or the elderly person might highly value, but they haven't actually disclosed that as being an important thing for them, but something that you should consider. We can certainly, as you can see, we have a whole range of solutions that might really significantly improve their quality of life.
Mm.
Thanks very much for coming today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I have just put the link to the quiz and survey in our chat. So if you do complete that, we'll send you a certificate of completion that you might be able to use for CPD points. So yeah, I've put up our contact details. We're just at the end of the phone line, and as Peter has said, we've got people all over the country. 1300 883 853 or info@quantumrlv.com.au. And quantumrlv.com.au is our website, and we've got all our different devices and things there. So yeah, thank you everybody, and I'll get the recording around. And yeah, thanks Peter and everyone that's been presenting today.
Thank you very much.
We'll leave it there.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks.
So guys, the easiest way.
For those of you watching the video, if you wish to complete the quiz, please select the link that was either sent to you in the email together with the recording, in the description with the video on our YouTube channel, or you can email info@quantumrlv.com.au and request the link. Thanks.